Connor put a hand onto the wall as he nearly doubled over in laughter. Did you see how hard that boot decked him? I think the birds did a better job than the boot. Lincoln laughed, stopping himself short when he decided to cough a little. Clyde and Liam came in through the door, appearing to both having a laughter fit. Hey Lincoln, did you see that prank on? Clyde stopped himself upon seeing Connor. The nerdy child let out a gasp. Is that your long-lost brother? Connor stopped laughing enough to give Clyde an annoyed glare. No. Liam squinted his eyes, rubbing his chin before he looked between Lincoln and Connor. I don't know. You both look alike. Hey, Lincoln. All four boys nearly jumped out of their skins to see Lucy, who was walking quickly towards her phone. Looks like your plan is a success. She then turned to the screen to show a picture received from Ronnie Ann of a murdered crows pecking constantly at the flailing red-headed jerk. Clyde's eyes became as big as his. You planned all that? Lincoln quickly clamped a head on Clyde's mouth, looking around to make sure students that were close. Fortunately, the overall chatter drowned out with a yelp. Lincoln pulled his best friend and over to the side, and the rest following curiously. Yeah, but I can't take all the credit. He started counting his fingers. I helped from Luann, Lisa, Lucy, the twins, even Connor and his sister, and his sister's friend, Ronnie Ann. The African-American's eyes shrank back to normal, while smaller than normal, at the mention of Luann. I thought that prank looked familiar. He shivered unconsciously. Luann's laughter didn't help ease Clyde's fear. She thought it was in his head. As soon as the comedian herself walked up, his eyes rolled back immediately as they fell into the floor. So, Liam started, trying to ignore Clyde's sudden faint. What did you prank the goat anyways? And weren't you supposed to be gone till Monday? He's the reason Lynn got injured so much on Tuesday, Lincoln stated, her voice almost getting bitter. I guess the cops didn't know about it yet, but they need to know, the boy smiled. Got this taken care of ourselves. You sure? 'Cause I all heard about that little court hearing or whatever coming up. Oh, don't worry. We're not done with him yet, until he really gets our point crossed. Connor rubbed his hands together in an evil-like fashion. He's gonna wet his pants so hard for what I'm gonna do with him. The bell ringing, cutting off Connor's snickering, as everyone besides Lincoln started to panic. Dang it, I can't get another tardy, Liam shouted, making a run for his locker. Clyde came back to reality after the ringing of his ears stopped. He then jumped to his feet and began chasing after Liam, shouting, My perfect attendance record! See you at home, Link, Luann shouted as she disappeared some stairs. Bye, Lincoln, Lucy started before she ran off. Lincoln turned to Connor, who was just walking with his hands in his pockets. Aren't you running? I'm in a good mood right now, so I don't care if I'm late, Connor answered without looking back. See you around, Lincoln. Lincoln shrugged before heading back towards the school entrance. The boot hung lazily out the box, and gazing outside, Lincoln could see bits of hay and feathers covering the wet spot on the sidewalk. Smiling contentedly, Lincoln hummed to himself as he strolled out of the school and started his journey back to his house. With nothing else in his mind right now, perhaps he could sit down and read comics in his undies like usual. Maybe even pay Lynn and Ronnie Ann a visit when he got time to. Wherever life took him at this point, he didn't really care. So as long as he had family and friends, hence he could count, he would still be there for them in return. Whatever it be a supportive brother, a decent boyfriend, or a nice guy to hang out with, he'd do it all. The sun shines brightly on a nice day every once in a while, but as we all know, life can be seen pretty ugly, even on some decent days. 7 months later, with big gaps, time comes changes, whatever it be big or small, and it had nothing said happen with the three families. That would be one of the biggest lies of the year. Was it many events occurred within this frame? It's hard to understand, unless part of it being from the beginning. Lincoln resumed his classes on Monday, having been able to catch up easily thanks to Clyde, giving him notes from class onto the subjects that covered almost daily. Within those days, Lori was able to get him a new phone, using her free upgrade option. Just in time, too, since he got in trouble once with the noisy radio. He was also able to help Ronnie Yang catch up in the 2 classes they shared. Although the little Latina still had a decent amount to cover, Lincoln took the initiative to get Lynn's classes so she wouldn't be so far behind, much to the disdain of the 13-year-old. Lynn just didn't want to be bothered more than she already was. She was already sitting in the hospital, but Lincoln insisted that she better off doing her work now than later. "You sound just like Lisa," she once told him. "Please, I do not have the brain power of Albert Einstein," Lincoln replied back with a lisp, earning a laugh from the sporty Loud. The middle child wasn't doing it just for the help with academics, though. As the month dragged on, Lincoln spent as much time as he could with Lynn, visiting her nearly every day after school. The rest of the family came and went as well, but not as frequent as Lincoln would. The girls were too surprised, given that the 2 had been at each other's throats a while back. It was the perfect moment for them to re-establish that bond that had once since been lost, and Lynn Sr. nearly bawled his eyes out every time he found out his son and 5th oldest daughter sleeping peacefully with one another. Soon enough, Lynn had recovered to the point where she was no longer required to be bound to a bed, as she just had to make sure to use a wheelchair for the next several weeks as her weak leg healed. It may not have been the best idea, but at least at one point Lynn and Lincoln, riding on the back of Lynn's chair, could take a joy ride speeding down the halls of the hospital. You know that feeling you get when you're trying to have fun and your mom scolds you for being reckless? Try getting lip service from both Rita and Maria. The latter was especially angry with it all, didn't want her all the work, aiding Lynn to be equipped with her own stupidity. Either way, the 13-year-old was happy to be back at home instead of rotting away in some bed. After the week after her release, things became rather chilling. The trial was taking place on that Wednesday, and with the session so close, it brought up the fighting, bloodshed, shocks, the arrests. It was easy to bury the memories, but they could resurface twice, just as hard as snapping your fingers. Each of the kids involved in varying degrees of a nervous smile as the court date approached. Lincoln wasn't comfortable recalling the beatings, as clear as they were, but he managed to keep a smile on his face for half the time. Connor was a similar case, still required with some healing. Lynn stayed silent for much of their time before they appeared to be in court. Even Lincoln, talking to her, didn't want any warrant, anything other than a soft mumble. Lori and Carol did try not to show it, but they were still a little timid of having to remember across their little sibling's injury. However, one thing that separated them from the guilty party was that they had their families to back up and assurance as everything will be okay. And as for the 8 other boys involved, the trial went about as you expect. Each child gave their testimony about the incident, while half the teens admitted their guilt, other half downplayed or just to make up a story that would make the siblings look guilty. There was even a testament from the witness whose car managed to get damaged after Lynn smashed into it. You know what they tell you, that you're under oath to tell the truth, but nothing but the truth? It's best you stick to that rule. The fabricated stories caused quite an uproar that had been shut down at least 4 times. With Lynn and even Lori passing death threats to the other teens, there was also tense standoff between Carol and Hank. Imagine someone a boring bowling ball sized hole into your head just from glaring. It's not your average glare, where you're just annoyed from some moron cut you off on the highway. It's the kind of glare you gave when someone you make paste out of them if they made a single mistake. For better reference, think of Mikasa glaring at Levi and Aaron was on trial. The poor fat bastard hid his seat like a sea turtle, with the blonde's angry face enraged in his head. At the end of it, the Louds, the Santiagos, and the Pringies walked out victorious. Hank and Shock and Hawk were charged with aggravated assault, sentenced to 1 year in prison. Their parents were tasked with paying for Lynn Jr.'s hospital bill, as well as the owner of the damaged sedan. Many persons on social media considered them to be failures as a parent for letting their kids run rampant without batting an eye. The other 16s and Hazel Tucky got off a bit lighter, mostly being slapped with property damage and a relatively minor assault charge. They were sent to spend 6 months in juvenile corrections. as 7 months of community service to pay for the damage by their little rampage. Additionally, there was a little investigation launched on how Hazel Tucky recruits managed the sports teams after a rumor of the town falsely ages teens to allow them to participate in pee-wee sports coming up numerous times. Aside from that, everything appeared to be normal after a while. The rest of the school year went on as usual, with Connor being accepted into Lincoln's social circle and attracting some jealousy from Clyde or the best friend department, as well as the Pringy boy finally growing the balls to ask Christina out to hang out with him. Lori and Carol were on track of graduate in May, although they haven't figured out their college choices yet. However, as the summer started, Lynn began acting rather odd. Occasionally she woke up like a walking corpse. Sometimes the siblings would see her mumbling to herself, as if someone else was there. And at one point, Lucy found Lynn yelling at their own reflection. Concerned by this, maybe due to the whole bad luck incident, the siblings had to sat with the sporty loud to get her to the talk. The brunette revealed that she'd been talking to her other self, which bewildered everyone but Lori and Lisa. They clarified that there was a voice in the back of Lynn's head that doubted nearly everything else, saying that she'll revert back to her usual self at some point. No one thought that it was a bad thing, and as they wanted Lynn to be their usual prideful, occasionally annoying jock self. Problem was that Lynn didn't want it that way. Nothing of the problems caused to not only her family, but the teams that she played with. In particular, Lynn embarrassingly mentioned that doing a number 2 in the bathroom had been painful for a while. Lisa facepalmed at the moment that it was mentioned. I told you that silly habit of yours was going to cause some harm to you in the future. You should be glad that you haven't participated in any contact sports for over a month, or you would have done some moderate damage to your rectum. It should continue. The 4-year-old scolded. What's a rectum? Lenny asked incoherently. You should see how angry Margot was with me about it. I nearly made her poop herself in public for a stupid win. Lynn spoke softly, her gaze fixated on the floor instead of Lisa's heated stare. If you're having trouble with this kind of stuff, do you think I should see a doctor? Lincoln asked. Lynn's not that hurt bad, is she? Lana asked. Not that kind of doctor, sis. She means a shrink, Luna clarified. Look, guys, it's not big of a deal. I'll get it through myself. The jock tried, trying to appease him. Yeah, we'll see how that goes for ya, sore loser. A nagging voice, much like her own taunted voice, staring back at her head. Oh, would you just shut up? Lynn shouted, staring up into the ceiling, realizing that her siblings were staring at her. Not you guys. Lincoln hummed a bit. Actually, you don't need to see a doctor. The girls all directed their attention to him. You could talk with Clyde. Lola rolled her eyes. Really? That nerd doesn't even have his own problems to the point where he needs therapy? Yeah, he does. Lincoln smiled nervously. But Clyde could be quite insightful, despite what he goes through. He even helped me when I had my own issues that were hard to talk about. Like what? The princess asked, raising a brow. The middle child bit his lip, sweat forming on his forehead. Seeing that he was hesitant and called it a sister's tuition, the eldest answered for him. When he had a problem with dealing with all of us, given what happened in the spring, it's not surprising. The girls became a little crestfallen at that bad memory. Yeah, Lynn uttered softly. She took a deep breath and let out an uneven sigh. Look, if it'll get you guys off my case, I'll talk with Lincoln's nerdy friend. Knowing you'll keep hoovering things over like Lucy's bats. Actually, they hang from the ceiling, the Goth clarified. Whatever. Oh yeah, talking like some brat who wants to get rid of me, and I'm here to stay, Linda. And besides, the voice taunted, and chuckles giving Lynn a slight migraine. You'll go back to being the same arrogant sister who blames everyone else for your trouble someday. Lynn gritted her teeth as she resisted the urge to scream in frustration. She could deal with later. Putting her show in front of her siblings would invoke her second option. Things then took for a worse turn just a few days later. Not only for the Louds, while driving home with a late shift at work, Marcus Santiago was T-boned by another car. The initial impact broke his left arm and shattered his collarbone, with the following tumbles causing to the damage of his ribs, breaking at least 2 vertebrae on his spine, and leaving his nervous system in a state of shock. The driver of the other car, who was later to be reported heavily fatigued, died in the intentional collision. The first time she heard of it, Maria immediately sank to the floor in despair, gripped the phone in one hand, and Ronnie Ann was intentionally confused at this, only to receive the massive gut punch to a potentially of losing her father soon after. Bobby was very much like his sister, having called out for work after some time to visit him. Maria worked tirelessly to make sure Marcus would pull through. Even the doctors said it was several operations to correct his bones and find donated organs to replace their irreparably damaged. Some extreme vital organs like the heart and liver were well on their way towards Royal Woods General, but this time was one thing that never got pulled on this side. Marcus then suffered some total heart failure just hours before the replacement was to arrive. And even Maria kept up with the compressions to resuscitate him. She knew it was far too gone for any revival attempts to work. It's one thing to lose a spouse that you've loved and have a happy marriage with that feeling is magnified that you could watch them dying in your arms, that sickness you feel in your heart, knowing you can't do a thing to save them. The funeral was no better now that the widowed mother could barely finish her eulogy without pausing to cry every few minutes. Maria was never the same after that, now forced to spend her sleepless nights alone, instinctively laying on the hand on the spot near to her husband he used to apply. Along with came the task of raising her kids by herself, who were in no better shape than she was. Ronnie Ann hardly spoke to a word since her father's passing, only having his corpse-like look on her face most of the time. She was also a bit more irritable, and would often snap at the first thing that bothered her, usually Lincoln. But about the litigations at school, she hardly went outside, preferring to the dark comfort of her room that it gave her. Often she would sob in peace. She flicked through the photo album of what her family used to be. Try as she might, Bobby could never focus on his work like he used to. On top of worrying for his mother and sister, his father always told him one day that he would be the man of the house. He just didn't expect that responsibility to come soon. Sure, he tried to reach out Ronnie Ann when his mother couldn't, even asking Lincoln if he could help. While the Loud doesn't get angry as much, it didn't seem like he was making much of a progress. This is why it's always important to always have someone you can talk to, as a means of comforting you during the bad times you're going through. Maria found herself hanging out with Rita more often than usual, who used to offer some friendly activities, even invited her to her book club nights. Although this felt awkward as Maria wasn't really too interested in those activities. The Loud Marach also is voice of reason that she caught Maria drinking directly from a bottle of wine twice. The one time she wrestled out of her hand, Rita got an earful full of comments from the Hispanic widow, only to watch Maria broke down in sorrow after her register reaction and hazily in her mind. Rita was then left alone with words that was stuck in Maria's head to this day, and she still doesn't even know what to think of it, but she hears it playing in repeat. I know it's hard. I can't bear the thought of possibly losing Lynn, but you need to remind yourself that you need to pull yourself together. I mean, for God's sake, you're a mother of 2 kids. They need you more than anything else right now. They'll have to spend the rest of their lives without a father, and they'll need their mother to help guide them through it. Rita poured the rest of the wine down the sink and thrashed in the bottle. And if you start drinking again, so help me, I'll take the bottle and knock you on the head with it. She didn't entirely mean that last part, but it just screamed her to that point. Not only that, but about Maria's brother come down whenever he could just to see if they were all right. He doubled that he could do much help to help the situation without Rita's influence. The last time he visited, Carlos told Maria that they were free to visit the bodega whenever they wanted, even stay for a while if they needed to. Maria was rather unsure about this due to the fact her extended family lived 3 hours away, but kept in mind. As for Bobby, despite of he and Lori having a rocky relationship, he found himself confiding with her almost after his father's passing. It effectively mirrored the way he was there for Lori back in middle school, when she was going through her awkward phase. Along with that, Bobby found himself falling for her all over again, and Lori didn't even realize it. You can imagine the shocked look on her face when Bobby called her babe for the first time in months. And from then on, Lori promised that she wouldn't allow doing anything potentially compromise their relationship again. With Ronnie Ann, it took a whole month and a half of talking, getting her out of the house and being more affectionate towards her. But Lincoln very managed to break down the walls that she built around herself. When he thought about it, Marcus asking him to take care of Ronnie Ann sounded very cryptic in the way he said it. Of course, not everyone expected him to kick it so soon, either. Regardless, Lincoln didn't want to fail the promise that he had made to the man that he came to see as a surrogate father. Ronnie Ann then cried about as hard as she did the day her father died, and that she couldn't keep her inner turmoil at bay. And Lincoln was there for her for every second. The tomboy also felt like a total bitch of how she kept pushing away her boyfriend, and her family, all they wanted to do was to help her. While Ronnie Ann wasn't quite the same since, she eventually did get her tough girl demeanor back into a degree. However, some of the troubles the little Santiagos had weren't over. Marcus made a little more than half of the income that his family used to pay the bills, and with the loss of his maternity, Maria found herself to work double shifts just to make sure her kids had a roof over their heads and a comfortable life. $68K a year may seem like a lot, but when you have 2 kids, it isn't. Bobby opted to help pay the bills, whatever jobs could land, which surprisingly up to 7. But Maria did not wish that burden on her son. She wanted him to go to college, like he could at least get a high-paying job on his own, which his father was still far off, since he still was taking a semester off, as she needed to get the money in order to cover his tuition. Her double shifts at work to help keep things maintained at home, but the Maharaj knew that she couldn't keep up with this forever. Many times she would come home, tired from work, not even be able to bid her children good night. It was becoming an issue where she could hardly be there for them. With the bags developing around her eyes, Maria almost felt like her mother Rosa. What Maria needed was a way to solve her financial crisis, and luckily, she knew where just to look. One calm Saturday, Maria had just gone off the phone with her brother with a light smile on her face. That smile faltered, but turned the attention to the kids, who were sitting in the living room. She was going to drop a bombshell on them that she really wished that she had time to give hints about. But given her already hectic schedule, it pained to Maria to no end now. She could little to interact with her children. Giving a low, heavy sigh, the mother stalked to the living room to give them the news. "Hey kids, can I speak with you for a minute?" Ronnie Ann raised an eyebrow. "Sure, Mom. What is it about?" she asked, as she muted the channel. Maria sat in the unoccupied space between them. "How have you two been doing?" the mother asked Tad nervously. "Better, I guess," Bobby shrugged. "I am in line for the promotion at the pizza place." "It's just meant for me. I'd probably be hanging out with Lincoln, but he's out for the day," Ronnie Ann muttered. "Are you okay? You're acting a little weird." "Well, you all know, money's been rather tight since your father's passing, and I try to work double shifts nearly every day, but at this rate, the bills getting higher and higher." Maria paused, her hands gripping the seats of the jeans in anticipation. "I don't think we can't do this anymore." Ronnie Ann felt a twinge of fear in building, near a gut top of her confusion that her mother was putting out. "What are you getting at, Mom?" "Well, I arranged for us to move in with your Uncle Carlos and the rest of the family." It was so quiet those few seconds that you could hear as a pin drop. "We're moving?" her daughter yelled out. I know, Maria quickly stated. "I'm sorry for bringing it up all of a sudden, but it's not going to be that bad. You'll have plenty of opportunities to hang out with your cousins, grandparents, probably not your aunt and uncle so much since they work But what are you going to be doing, Mom?" Bobby asked in an uncertain tone. "Given that I'm a nurse, I decided to go back to college to get my master's degree so I could become a doctor. The college your uncle teaches provides a light education. I hope that when I get to my degree, we can move back to Royal Woods but without any problems of any currently facing." The mother explained her kids didn't look as helpful as she expected. Unfortunately, it could be a number of reasons, from having to adjust to a newer location, separation from their current friends, to spending little to no time with their significant other. Maria understood of each of their worries, having gone through it herself. I'm guessing you both are worried about Lori and Lincoln. Back when I was studying to be a nurse, I held a long-distance affair with your father. It was hard not seeing him every day, but we kept in touch through the phones. Even then, we had different schedules and didn't have a whole lot of time to talk. Maria smiled faintly. But when we actually made it work some 4 years later, it became very much worth it at the end. And since we agreed to meet up at Royal Oak, a little after college was dealt with. So I kept in touch with my old friends from time to time, and even making new ones. Although, as of late, I haven't had a clue as to what they're doing so far. The kids morph into shock into consideration. Yes, it will be difficult to adjust, but don't think this is only going to be the last time you'll see them. She got out of her seat and knelt down in front of them, gently grasping her hands. I promise you both will come back to Royal Woods. After all, it takes about 2 years or less to get a master's. Ronnie Ann and Bobby nodded, still taking the fact that their lives were about to change even further. Bobby was wondering how he was going to tell Lori. Sure, they still text each other every 10 minutes, but he also had some good friends and coworkers who'd missed him when he moved. And on top of that, not being able to hold her in his arms every day, they might even have to say goodbye to their planning dates. The younger girl wasn't sure how to break the news to her own friends or Lincoln, as she was certainly they'd take just about out of everything as well, though Ronnie Ann was growing more to accept that they needed to move. As much as Ronnie Ann, she didn't want to leave Royal Woods. The signs were always there. After her dad died, things were just never the same. What with her mom and her brother working more frequently than normal. The mailbox was always stuffed with some kind of bill that it needed to be paid, and Ronnie Ann came to notice. And every time Maria went out for groceries, she couldn't buy a whole lot, likely because she couldn't afford to. Still, they managed to get by, and like her mom, she could only keep up with the lifestyle for so long before something bad happened. Losing their house was one of their thoughts that shivers up Ronnie Ann's spine. Getting up from the couch, the tomboy shuffled into her room, lightly closing the door on their way in. She could hear Bobby flopping around on his bed, probably with his phone in hand. Ronnie Ann shot a glance around the living space that she slept in. For as far back as she could remember, she knew they lived in Royal Woods for a good while, though they lived in some other house when she was in diapers. Her eyes laid on top of the phone, sitting on her nightstand, with nervousness swelling in her gut as she dialed a certain loud's number.